Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Dr. Jane Durston, and our subject is holistic health. Jane, good to see you.
Good to see you, Tony, as well. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you.
Absolute pleasure. First of all, tell us, what is holistic health?
Well, I mean, I'm a traditionally trained doctor many moons ago, but I've sort of transitioned to holistic health, and I think it really is the way forward for health for the future, because I think it's much more empowering for people if they can see that they can actually have a positive effect on their own health. And holistic health is all about considering you as a complete person. So we're not just looking at one system that might be out of kilter. We actually look at you from the point of view as your mind, your body, your soul, your spirit, as a complete entity. And when I say we, I mean nutritional therapists, naturopaths, and functional medicine doctors will all use that sort of approach rather than focusing in one system of the body. They will look at you in that manner, and they'll probably ask you to fill in something like a system questionnaire, and they will find things that you will not necessarily associate with some of the symptoms that you were originally complaining of, but there will be a connection, and they'll be hunting for that connection to explain it. So it's a really interesting way and a very different way to work.
Yeah, because I suppose up to a point, we're ill, we go and see the GP and they look at the specific disorder of the day. Whereas you're sort of doing a survey of the whole lot and then trying to work forward from that. So whole health as far as the body's concerned, how do you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's, I say whole health as far as the body, but that does include the mind as well. So
Yeah.
it is about the whole thing. And it's because there are so many interconnections in the body. And that is something that's developing all the time. And it's really interesting, the impact that can actually have, and far-reaching impacts actually, and how seemingly trivial little things can actually be linked. And it's really, really interesting. So, I mean, something that immediately comes to mind is someone who might come to you and say, well, I'm just not feeling right. My guts are a bit upset, and, I've got this continual stuffy nose and my ears aren't very good. And what you might find actually is it's something like lactose intolerance. And although those sort of things are not obvious to a traditional doctor, they would be to, say, a nutritional therapist, a naturopath, or a functional medicine doctor. So you end up then with something as simple as saying, well, let's talk about excluding dairy and see how you go. And a lot of those things will probably resolve.
Yeah. What about the mind?
Well, the mind, you see, is just part of that picture.
Yeah.
So that there are, although I appreciate that there are severe mental health disorders that will need traditional treatment, but you can actually support an awful lot by eating the right foods and following lifestyle changes to actually support a healthy mind within that whole picture. And simple things like, making sure you get out in nature. They've now got a tremendous wealth of information about how positive it is getting out in a garden, getting out in a woodland. I mean, we all laugh about tree huggers, but actually just getting out in a woodland has a very calming effect on you, and a very positive effect on your mental state. Go and stand on a beach. I mean, we're very lucky here in that, we can do that. We can go and stand by the sea and go and stand on a beach. But that peace and quiet is very important. But even just to the extent of, doing some simple gardening, and, getting used to growing things can have beneficial effects. So it's about actually tapping into those lifestyle changes.
A lot of people suffer from stress. Is that controllable?
There are so many things that people can do with stress that you could probably do a whole podcast just on stress.
Well, we'll do that later in the year.
But yeah, I mean, stress is, it's one of those things. We talk about stress as if it's something new, but it's not new. It's always been around. It's part of our daily lives, whether it was the 18th century or whether it's this century. It's just those stresses are different. And it's how we actually cope with those stresses. To a certain extent, we need some stress in our lives, but it's when the level gets too high, that actually it becomes a negative impact. I mean, we all know that probably, in the past, we've performed better under a certain amount of stress. I know that, the anticipation of doing something like this or doing a presentation actually gives me that little bit of an edge, that enthusiasm to actually do it. And if you didn't have that, then you perhaps wouldn't do as well as you would like to do. You wouldn't get the information over as well as you would want to. And so that little bit of stress is okay. It's how we actually come down from that stress that's important, and how we relieve that. And if you think of yourself as a bucket with a hole in the bottom, and our everyday things are piling into that. We've got worries about COVID at the moment. We've got worries about our family. We've got worries about our own health. We've got worries about whether the boat will get in this week or whatever. So all those things are going into the bucket. And if we don't find a way of helping that bucket to empty, it overflows. And that's when stress is not a good thing. So it's how you empty that bucket, and having quiet times to actually de-stress, to cope with it. And it's about finding things that are right with you. For you, it isn't a one size fits all. It's about how you actually empty that bucket in your way. And that might be going for a walk. For me, that's a big one. I love going for a walk. For other people, it might be sitting and knitting or doing some painting. But it's how you actually do that. And also how we avoid the things that we think help us get rid of stress and actually don't, or how we limit those. And smoking is one thing, alcohol is another. But it's how we temper those things so that we're not sort of feel as though we're completely missing out. But it's how we actually empty that bucket successfully. So stress is something that we have to learn to manage, and I think everybody should actively learn to do that, even if they're young or old. It's how you learn to do it. It's a life skill.
I've always thought there were two forms of worry. One, you can control. Two, you can't. So during the Cold War, everyone was worried about the Russians dropping an H-bomb on us. Well, that's something you can't control. Something a bit more local and closer to heart, you can control.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing is about if something is worrying, it's something you can do something about, then do it. Find a way to actually do that. And that action will actually help you relieve that stress, or at least go some way to think, yeah, it's okay, I'm managing this now. But if you're continually ruminating about things that have happened that you had no control over, or things that you have no control over anyway, then it's self-defeating, and it's a way of perpetuating that stress anyway. And in fact, stress relief is really well managed by a very simple thing. If you're sitting there thinking, what do I do? And there's a saying that says, if you want to change the emotion, change the motion. So basically, if you're feeling worried and you're sitting there worrying about it, get up and do something. Even to the extent of just going for a walk, or get up and dance, put a record on, get up and dance. But just by changing your physical state helps you change that emotion, and things will often become easier to look at, if not completely go away. And I think that's a really easy tip to actually to incorporate in your life.
how do you define spirit? I mean, you know, optimist, 50% full, pessimist, virtually empty.
Yeah, I mean, you know, everybody has their own way of finding their spirit, their soul, their life purpose. And I think, you know, certainly from in my life, that life purpose has changed as I've gone through certainly the last 20 odd years. So, you know, it's about actually dealing with those changes. But it doesn't mean to say that you have to have a religion. But it just means you have to have something to believe in, and that belief may well be something that you're passionate in, that you want to get involved in, that you'd love to tell people more about. And that's really important as far as that holistic health. People without life purpose often become more stressed. They often find unhealthy ways of coping with stress, which again, you know, really makes them more stressed anyway. So having that life purpose is really, really crucial.
We hear a lot about mental health these days.
Yeah,
but hasn't it been around forever and a day?
I think that poor mental health has always been around. I think there is now a bigger there's a bigger awareness of it.
Yeah.
And I think there may well be an increase in poor mental health, particularly with COVID, because of the stress that goes along with that. And I know for a lot of people, you know, being by themselves in particular is really, really difficult, and being separated from loved ones is really, really difficult. So I think it's something that may well be more prominent as we go forward now. But I think it's something we just all have to be aware of. Nobody is immune. You know, to say, well, I've always been fine, I always will be. As a person who's been in that situation, I know that having a mental health problem is not something that we're immune of.
It can happen to anyone.
It can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be aware of your own mood, and talk to those that are close to you if you're really feeling that you have concerns, or if you are by yourself, then talk to a practitioner about it. Speak to someone who's actually specialised in that area.
And it is vital, isn't it, to have conversations with people, not to well it up inside.
It is, and you know, just the mere fact of letting it out, as you say, you know, we used to say, you know, just let it all out. Well, sometimes that's all you need. You know, if you've been bottling up emotions, just letting it out and talking about it can be so cathartic. You know, it can really have a positive effect. And that may all that you actually need to do on a regular basis. But I think there's a fear, I think, that mental health means you're mad. There are two different things. It doesn't mean that. It just means that just as you can have an illness in your body, there is an illness in your mind. That's all. There's a balance. You just need to get that balance back again.
Now, some of the material you sent to me was quite fascinating with this. What would you describe it? A chart joining up the issues?
Yeah. Well, I used to call it a well-being compass.
Yeah. Okay.
Because to me, it pointed to the areas that needed work on. But basically, if you consider your health as a compass, and that compass is divided into areas by the arrows on the compass. And in this case, the compass has more than 4, so there's quite a few there. And you could divide it into areas such as nutrition, movement, sleep, lifestyle and pace, relationships, finances, all sorts of different things. But if you imagine that the needle on the compass is like a scale, and where it's joined to the middle is 0, which means things are pretty bad, and where it reaches the edge, that's number 10, which means that things could be better. They're absolutely wonderful. And then all you do is for each area that you want to look at in your health, you score. And when you've got all the scores on the needles as you go round, you join them all up.
Yeah.
And you can see that for the majority of people, there will be dips. That not everybody's going to be numbered all 10 all the way around, but there will be dips. And that just means that actually something's out of balance. And what you need to do then is to try and bring that value up by paying attention to that area so that things are more rounded, they're more balanced. What you may find is that there are opposites, that there may be more than one area that's out of kilter. In fact, it's very rare just to have one area. You might have 2 or 3, and they may be interrelated. So what you need to do then is gradually bring each area up so you're scoring higher and are in a more balanced, holistic, healthy state. So it's a really interesting tool to use.
Yeah. I was very interested.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Now, you've trained as a doctor, so you started off with a conventional outlook.
Yeah.
But, you know, my feeling as far as the medical profession is concerned, you know, I quoted in our notes this question of, you know, you put your back out and you need a chiropractor. But if you go and see the doctor, they'll probably give you painkillers. Now, the back's a bit mechanical, isn't it? In terms of the way it works. So if it's displaced, it needs to be replaced.
Yeah.
And I found in the past, a lot of doctors have been quite anti-chiropractors. What do you say about that?
I think the area of traditional medicine and alternative therapies, as they're called, like, you know, a chiropractor would fit into that. It has been very difficult, but there's now beginning to be a bit more of an overlap. And I think, you know, I think that's a healthy relationship, because so many of the complementary and alternative therapies, and I think it's better actually to call them complementary, because then it's easier to see how they can actually, it's not an alternative, but they need to work together. I think that's a really important thing to do, but it's actually seeing where they all fit in together. And so many things nowadays that people go and see a doctor about, their GP about, are actually lifestyle related. And that's where the complementary therapies actually come in, because there are therapies that can aid your stress relief, that can aid relaxation. There are therapies and movement regimes that can aid in things like, you know, your bad back. And there are, you know, the nutrition side, which is the one that I'm really interested in, you know, is actually the building blocks to putting everything else right. So, you know, it is a way of actually using the two together. And there's a lot of doctors now in the UK, all over the world, but a lot of the doctors in the UK now are actually beginning to say that they're using lifestyle medicine much more. And that's what they mean by lifestyle medicine. It's this holistic approach. It's saying, well, yeah, you've come in saying that's wrong, but actually let's look beneath that and find out what's really going on, and then we can put it right. And that isn't automatically then here's a tablet. And I'm not knocking medicine.
No.
Medicine has its place.
Sure.
I think it's really important to you know, say that medicine has its place, but often time constraints don't always allow a GP to go through a detailed history and find out all the things that are going on underneath, and then have the time to actually coach the person and put them into practice. So I think that's a really important thing to actually to appreciate.
Yeah. Type 2 diabetes, for example, that can be reduced or cured by diet, can't it?
It can, yes. And I think this is really, really fascinating, and it's been one of the most prominent things really to actually come out of lifestyle medicine, is the reversal of type 2 diabetes just by having a different way of eating. And notice I'm not saying diet, because diet has poor connotations. In that, if I say to you diet, you might say, well, how long have I got to do it for? and it's a way of eating. So this way of eating is different to the way you'll have eaten in the past, but it will help you actually reverse your diabetes to a state where you may not need medication. And it's actually tackling the underlying cause, not treating the symptoms, which is what the tablets will do.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. What about sleeping problems?
Oh,
I don't seem to have that problem, actually.
Oh, good for you. I think it's probably one of the most commonest problems that people have. And it's again back down to so many of lifestyle issues and how we live our life now and our expectations of sleep. And if I can, there's a really good book, which if people have sleep problems, I recommend you reading. It's by Matthew Walker, and it's called Why We Sleep. And it's a really, really good book. And he actually goes through a lot of the lifestyle issues that actually interfere with sleep, and why sleep is so important, and why if we're sleeping badly, the knock-on effect as far as our day-to-day life is concerned can be huge. But again, it's something that if you take the time and you go through all the issues and do it slowly, and don't expect to have it all done in a week, but if you do it systematically and carefully, and go through your lifestyle, you can probably solve your sleep problems and improve your sleep dramatically. But I think you need to remember that most of us, as we get older, actually need to sleep less. And we have this expectation that we should still be sleeping for many, many hours a day, and we just don't need that amount of sleep. But we can still improve that.
I'll pass that one on to Christine. Okay, so we've talked about diabetes, but food types can be bad for you, can be good for you, and it isn't necessarily in connection with type 2 diabetes or anything like that. Food manufacturers tend to sort of make us want to eat more by piling in the salt and stuff like that. Got any, do you, for example, think the sugar tax on soft drinks in the UK was a good idea?
Yeah, I actually think sugar is a bigger problem than salt ever was or ever will be. Sugar, the combination of sugar and high levels of trans and processed fats is a much bigger problem than salt will ever be. Because if you put too much salt in stuff, it actually tastes bad. But if you continue to pile fat and sugar combined together, then it actually tastes really, really good, and we just want to eat more of it. We're wired to actually eat more sugar. So I think the sugar tax is a two-edged sword. In theory, it sounds brilliant, because if you tax people, they'll stop eating, but you have to give them the education as well to actually say why it's not a good idea to continue to eat sugar at that level, and to actually give them an alternative as well. If I immediately say to you, you will not eat another roast chicken again ever, what do you immediately want? Well, I better get a few in now before she says,
Yeah.
But it's true. You say to someone, you will never eat that again. That's immediately what you want. So I think it's a double-edged sword. It may raise the government a lot of money, but I don't think sure it'll solve the problem. And the fact is,
it was a political decision more than a help the nation's health in many respects. Yeah. As far as meat's concerned, in moderation.
Meat is good. Meat is good. You see, this is the power of the internet. And I know this is something we wanted to talk about, was the power of the internet. Last year there was a video released on, and I think it's on YouTube, I'm not really sure now, called Game Changer, and it was about the power of vegan eating. And there was an awful lot of toing and froing about whether vegetarian veganism and eating meat was good for you. And the basic fact is that we're actually designed to eat meat, but we also need to eat vegetables as well. But it's finding that balance. And eating better quality meat is actually better than eating poor quality meat. So it's about, if you want to eat meat, then eat the best you can. And that doesn't mean to say you've got to eat fillet steak every time. That means eating grass-fed beef. So we're lucky here, you know, we've got a farm just up the road, but you know, we know that meat is grass-fed, and we've got pork on the island that's free range. So that's good quality meat. If you're eating highly processed meat that really doesn't resemble the animal it's coming from, then that's not so good, because there are other things going on. So I think the case is, for me, is eat good quality fish and meat, and get some balance there. It's just as important to have, you know, some oily fish in your diet as it is to have a bit of meat.
What about antibiotics that they put into the animals whilst they're alive? Can they sort of get into our system?
Yeah, I mean, there's been an awful lot about this, and I think, you know, antibiotics in any food chain are not a good idea. And I think certainly the UK was very hot on antibiotics, and a lot of the farmers actually don't use prophylactic antibiotics. That means antibiotics that are there to stop an infection, not to treat the animal. So prophylactic antibiotics are not used as much as they used to be, and I personally wouldn't want to eat meat that had been, you know, had antibiotic usage, or for just that reason. And it was found that actually antibiotics help weight gain by altering the gut bacteria in animals, which is why it used to be used. But it's not a good idea, because we know we've got antibiotic resistance in the world at the moment, and that just aids it, because it's just in the environment all the time.
Yeah. Would that be the same as growth hormones?
Well, growth hormones are not good either, because growth hormones are released in the body at high levels at particular times in life. You know, obviously in children and babies, they're released. There's always a little bit of growth hormone going on, but not too much. But if you've got growth hormone there at the wrong, you know, when we don't need it, then yeah, it puts a tremendous amount of stress on your body, and it's not a good thing to have. Because hormones are one of the most complicated systems in the body, and when you start altering hormones in the body, then it has knock-on effects elsewhere. So you really don't want hormones coming into the body from outside.
Yeah. Okay, so can we move on to the role of supplements?
Yes.
And talk about recommended vitamins. I'm doing vitamin D at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, supplements in themselves are what they say.
Yeah.
They should supplement a good diet. Now, the problem is with our diet, or where we live, although we're slightly better, is that we live in the Northern Hemisphere. So the amount of sunlight that we need to make vitamin D, and that's our biggest source of vitamin D, is from the sun, is just not there between October and March. And so supplementation between those months is a really good idea. Particularly because everybody thought, you know, one time people used to say, well, vitamin D, it's important for calcium to build healthy bones, but actually it's really, really important for our immune system, which is why, you know, it's come to such a prominent place in the last 12 months really with COVID, because of they found that actually a lot of people that have been in ITU or have been badly affected with COVID have actually had very low levels of vitamin D. So that's why there's been recommendations to actually supplement with vitamin D. And I think that's a really good idea. And I know I've seen people that have had clinically low levels of vitamin D, even in the middle of the summer, because there are people that don't like going out in the sun. So there are reasons to actually pop up on things like vitamin D. There's also something which is talked about in nutritional therapy circles called the nutrition gap. And because we use so much intensive farming nowadays, the soil tends to be depleted of several minerals, and which are actually important. We don't need a lot of them, but we do need them, you know, in our diet. So, and they're missing from the food, from the vegetables that we eat now. So there is a school of thought which actually says that taking a multivitamin and mineral on a daily basis just helps to top up your vitamin and mineral levels just to a more optimum level.
Yeah.
People will say, well, you shouldn't need it, because if you're not deficient, why do you need supplements? There's a difference between what they call the recommended daily amount for a vitamin and mineral, which is actually the amount that you need to stop you get deficiency. And a nutritional therapist and a naturopath will talk about optimum health. So if I'm trying to get to you to optimum health, I may well recommend supplements to actually get you there, because of those reasons.
We're running a bit short on time, unfortunately, but before we conclude, tell us about some of these things we see on the internet. Internet speak with forked tongue.
Yeah. I think it's a source of great information if you know how to sort through it, but it can also be a source of great angst and basically misinformation.
Yeah.
And I think the thing to do with the internet is basically, if you see something that looks interesting, go and try and find it somewhere else. Try and find it in several places, and at least get some collaboration. If it's a scientific, bit of information, find some research to back it up.
Yeah.
And research there is in the internet now is actually quite easy to find. So find some information to back it up. Don't just accept what people are saying on Facebook, Twitter, or anything else like that. Because although there are, some good scientific people on all those places, it is difficult to actually sort it out. So I think you have to have a lot of critical thinking to actually through the information, and it can be really, really difficult, I have to say.
But take it with a pinch of salt unless you can corroborate it elsewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Jane, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. I hope you come back, in a few months' time to have another chat. Oh, of course. But meantime, thank you so much. Really enjoyed our chat. Thank you.
Thank you.